The night Han Soyan insulted me, I was carrying 32 bowls of truffle cream pasta through a mansion filled with people who had never carried anything heavier than their family names. My delivery jacket smelled like rain and garlic. Their suits smelled like money. I had almost reached the banquet table when a drunk heir stepped into my path and asked whether the catering company had started hiring beggars. I ignored him because delivery work taught me that rich people became most dangerous when denied an audience. Then Soyan turned from the champagne tower and looked directly at me. She was the daughter of Han Seongjin, owner of Hanul Grand Hotels, and the person every camera at the party had been waiting to photograph. Her next words were sharp enough to cut through the music. She told me workers should use the service entrance and asked security why someone dressed like me had entered the main hall. Everyone laughed because the richest girl at the party had granted them permission. I looked at the hand gripping her champagne glass and noticed it shaking. I also noticed Baek Dojin standing behind her, smiling without amusement. That was why I did not answer the insult. Security escorted me toward the side corridor while guests recorded the scene. One of them asked whether I had fallen in love with the princess after receiving eye contact. I kept walking. Soyan did not look at me again. Just before the door closed, however, she whispered something to her assistant. 10 minutes later, the delivery app showed a tip equal to 3 days of my wages. I rejected the tip, not because I was noble, but because I did not want money attached to humiliation. My name was Seo Junha. I was 22, a university dropout, a delivery rider, and co-founder of a logistics company nobody took seriously because our office was a storage unit beside a tire shop. We called it Night Owl Relay because every better name had already been purchased. My partner, Park Min-soo, saw the party video before I returned. He played it on the warehouse television while our 5 riders argued over instant noodles. The clip had already passed 200,000 views. Min-soo paused on Soyan's expression and said she looked like someone insulting a hostage negotiator while the hostage taker stood behind her. Min-soo was dramatic, but not wrong. He had grown up around debt collectors and recognized controlled fear faster than most people recognized luxury brands. I told him the delivery was finished and the customer was no longer our problem. He asked whether I was saying that because I believed it or because the video had bruised my pride. I replied by opening the overnight auction listings. Night Owl Relay survived by buying abandoned delivery routes, failed restaurant contracts, and repossessed vehicles nobody else understood. We did not have a magical system. We had spreadsheets, insomnia, and an old warehouse manager named Oh Daeho, who could estimate the remaining life of an engine by listening to it idle. That night, a bankrupt luxury rental company called Velox Mobility was being liquidated. Most bidders wanted its sports cars. I wanted its airport permits, hotel delivery contracts, and temperature-controlled dispatch software. The auction bundle included 12 vans, 3 motorcycles, 1 ruined office, and a yellow Lamborghini Huracan with a disputed insurance title. Min-soo laughed when I said we should bid. Our company account held barely enough to cover payroll and the deposit. I showed him the airport contracts buried in the liquidation documents. Velox had lost money because its owner treated the fleet like jewelry. The route permits alone could triple our revenue if we kept the drivers and repaired the scheduling system. We mortgaged my mother's small apartment only after she threatened to disown me for asking permission like a frightened child. She said businesses were allowed to fail, but sons were not allowed to hide risk from mothers. We pooled every reserve, convinced Daeho to invest his retirement bonus, and submitted a bid everyone assumed was aimed at the Lamborghini. We won before dawn. The court cleared the title after discovering the insurance dispute came from a missing customs stamp, not theft. The Lamborghini became legally ours for less than the price of 1 new delivery van. Min-soo wanted to sell it immediately. Daeho wanted to remove the engine and display it like a religious object. I wanted sleep. Then a new order appeared on the app. Pickup, a small porridge shop near Seoul National Hospital. Delivery, Han Soyan, private residence. The note requested plain abalone porridge with no sesame oil, likely for a patient. Min-soo looked from the order to the Lamborghini keys and said the universe had finally developed a sense of humor. I refused to turn a delivery into revenge. Min-soo reminded me that every Velox vehicle needed a public operational test for insurance activation. The vans were still being inspected. The motorcycles had no plates. The only cleared vehicle was the Lamborghini. Daeho placed the keys in my hand and told me not to scratch our most impractical company asset. By noon, the video of a delivery rider arriving in a Lamborghini had already started spreading. I hated that the car announced me before I spoke. At the gate of the Han residence, security recognized me from the party and assumed I had rented the vehicle for attention. I opened the insulated delivery case and asked whether rich people preferred their porridge cold. Soyeon came outside before they could answer. She wore no makeup, and the confidence from the party had disappeared. Her eyes moved from my delivery jacket to the Lamborghini and then to the rejected tip notification still visible on her phone. She asked whether I had bought the car just to embarrass her. I said I had bought a bankrupt company and the car came with paperwork problems. For the first time, she laughed without checking who was watching. Then two men in gray suits carried numbered stickers past us and entered the house. One placed a seizure label on an antique cabinet visible through the open door. Soyeon's laughter stopped. She took the porridge, thanked me, and asked security to close the gate. Before it shut, I saw her father lying on a hospital bed in the living room, connected to portable equipment. I also saw Baek Dojin's lawyer reviewing a list of household assets. The mansion did not look wealthy anymore. It looked like a beautiful ship already divided among creditors. I could have driven away. Instead, I checked the delivery receipt and noticed the order had been paid with a prepaid meal voucher issued to hotel employees. The richest girl from the party had not used a personal card. Her family accounts were frozen. That detail followed me back to the warehouse more loudly than the Lamborghini's engine. Minsu searched public filings while I pretended not to care. Hanul Grand Hotels had borrowed heavily to build 3 seaside resorts. A typhoon delayed construction, tourism collapsed, and Baek Meridian Capital offered emergency financing. The loan carried variable interest, personal guarantees, and a conversion clause that could transfer control if Hanul missed 2 payments. The company had missed one. The second was due in 30 days. Baek Dojin was not merely Soyeon's wealthy party companion. His father owned Baek Meridian. The party had been advertised as a charity gala, but private messages suggested it was actually the announcement of an engagement meant to reassure creditors. Soyeon's insult suddenly made sense. If she publicly showed kindness to a delivery rider while Dojin's family expected an obedient future daughter-in-law, she risked giving them another excuse to tighten control. Understanding did not erase what she had done. It only made the cruelty look borrowed. I told Minsu to stop digging. He asked why. I said we were logistics operators, not rescuers of chaebol daughters. He said the hotel group owed Velox Mobility 6 months of unpaid delivery invoices, meaning their debt was literally our business. That was the first thread tying our small warehouse to the Han family's collapse. Velox had delivered luxury catering supplies to Hanul hotels before bankruptcy. The route logs showed thousands of late-night shipments between warehouses that should never have exchanged goods. Refrigerated trucks left full and returned with identical weight. Fuel was billed, drivers were paid, but inventory records showed nothing moved. Someone had used delivery routes to create fake expenses and drain cash from Hanul. The charges were approved by the hotel group's procurement director, Han Sung-woo, Soyeon's cousin. If the invoices were fraudulent, Baek Meridian had financed a crisis it may have helped create. I still did not want involvement. Then Daeho found 3 former Velox drivers who had been ordered to park at empty warehouses for hours and sign sealed manifests. One driver had refused. His contract vanished the next day. He now worked nights loading fish boxes and believed speaking would blacklist him from every major hotel. Night Owl Relay owed those drivers more than wages. We had purchased Velox's contracts, liabilities, and records. Their exploitation had become part of the company we now owned. I could ignore Soyeon's family. I could not ignore workers whose signatures had been used to manufacture debt. I returned to the Han residence with a second delivery I had ordered myself. Soyeon met me at the gate and said her father could not eat another bowl of porridge. I handed her a folder instead. Inside were Velox route logs, false warehouse transfers, and unpaid driver invoices. She read the first page and lost color. She asked how much I wanted. The question irritated me more than the insult. I told her if she treated every offer as a price, she would eventually sell the one thing nobody had requested. She closed the folder and said people rarely approached her family without wanting access, gratitude, or leverage. I said I wanted the unpaid Velox invoices and permission to interview Hanul warehouse staff. She asked whether the Lamborghini was supposed to make that demand look less absurd. I replied that the car belonged to the company, not my ego. Daeho would have disagreed, but he was not there. Sleon refused. Her father had signed confidentiality agreements with Beck Meridian, and any accusation could trigger immediate default. She said one careless rumor could cost 10,000 employees their jobs. I answered that silence had already cost workers wages and allowed false debt to grow. She told me I did not understand responsibility at that scale. I looked at the seizure labels behind her and said scale did not change the meaning of a lie. It only increased the number of people forced to live inside it. The gate closed between us again. That evening, someone slashed 2 tires on one of our delivery vans. The security camera captured a man wearing a Hanul subcontractor badge. Minsu wanted police involvement. Daeho recognized the badge as belonging to a shell staffing company linked to Han Sung-woo. The warning convinced Soyeon where my documents had not. She arrived at our warehouse after midnight in a plain cap and mask, without a driver. The Lamborghini sat between dented vans like a jewel dropped into a toolbox. She stared at our tiny office and asked whether this was really the headquarters of the company that had challenged her family. I told her headquarters was a generous word. She apologized for the party before discussing business. Not a polished apology. She said she had seen Dojin threaten a waiter earlier that night and believed humiliating me publicly would make him lose interest. She knew it was cowardly and cruel. She did not ask me to understand. I accepted the apology without forgiving her immediately. Then she explained the debt. Her father had borrowed to keep workers paid after the typhoon, but the construction losses were far larger than expected. Sung-woo controlled procurement and claimed suppliers demanded emergency premiums. Beck Meridian offered rescue money before auditors could verify anything. 6 months later, interest payments consumed every profitable hotel. Dojin's father proposed a solution. Soyeon would marry Dojin. Hanul would merge its loyalty program with Beck's financial network, and the missed payment would be extended. Refuse, and the loan converted into majority control. The marriage was not written into the contract. That made it harder to fight. It existed in private meetings, implied threats, and the quiet understanding that her father's personal guarantee included the family home and her mother's medical trust. Dojin could deny coercion while benefiting from it. Soyeon's mother had died years earlier. The medical trust supported a foundation she had created for hotel workers' families. If the debt converted, Beck Meridian could dissolve it. Soyeon was not only protecting a company. She was carrying the last thing her mother had built. I asked why her father had not gone public. She said Chairman Han believed reputation was collateral. If the market learned the numbers were false before proof existed, banks would demand repayment and guests would flee. He had chosen silence to protect the brand. Every month of silence gave Sung-woo more time to erase evidence. We made a contract on the back of a delivery manifest. Night Owl Relay would audit disputed logistics records in exchange for payment only if we recovered money. Soyeon would give us access to warehouses, staff schedules, and procurement archives. Neither side would owe personal loyalty, public praise, or romantic gratitude. Minsu added the final clause. Nobody was allowed to insult delivery workers at parties. Soyeon signed beside it. That was how the richest girl in Seoul became a client of a company whose bathroom door did not lock. Our investigation began with cold storage. Fake invoices claimed premium seafood moved nightly between Hanul's central kitchen and 3 hotels. Yet temperature sensor data showed the trucks never opened. Someone had driven empty loops to justify payments to a supplier called Silver Pine Distribution. Silver Pine's registered office was an abandoned language academy. Its director was a retired driver living in assisted housing who had never heard of the company. His identity had been stolen after he submitted documents for a Hanul pension claim. The bank account receiving payments transferred money to a Beck Meridian advisory firm. That link was strong, but not enough. Beck could claim the advisory firm served legitimate clients. We needed internal approval records. Soyeon arranged temporary access to Hanul's procurement floor by hiring Night Owl to redesign emergency delivery routes. For 3 days, I wore a visitor badge and listened to executives talk around me as if workers could not understand Korean. Han Sung-woo noticed me on the 2nd day. He was 30, handsome, and carried the exhausted confidence of someone who believed betrayal was simply early realism. He asked why Soyeon had brought her delivery boyfriend into company operations. I said I charged extra for emotional titles. Sungwoo smiled and invited me to dinner. Soyeon warned me not to go. I went because men like him revealed more when they believed you wanted entry into their world. He chose a private restaurant overlooking the river and ordered wine worth more than our monthly warehouse rent. He told me Hanul was already dead. The hotels looked full, but the debt structure made recovery impossible. Beck Meridian would take control, fire unnecessary staff, sell the seaside land, and move on. He had helped because someone had to survive the collapse with enough influence to protect the family. I asked whether stealing from the company counted as protection. He did not deny it. He said false procurement invoices created liquidity that kept vendors cooperative while giving Beck a reason to extend loans. Everyone had benefited until tourism failed. The crime, in his mind, was not the scheme. It was bad timing. Then he offered to buy Night Owl Relay. He knew about the Velox acquisition, airport permits, and our debt. The price would repay my mother's mortgage and make every rider wealthy by our standards. In return, I would surrender the route records and sign a statement blaming Velox's former owner. I asked why he thought I would agree. He said poor men loved principles until principles met family property. He knew about my mother's apartment. That turned the dinner from negotiation into threat. I stood up and told him the wine tasted like refrigerated lies. Outside, I discovered the Lamborghini had been keyed from front to rear. Daeho nearly cried when he saw the damage. I expected anger at the repair cost. Instead, he said metal could be repainted, but fear spread if people saw us retreat. He ordered a full wrap in Night Owl's black and gold delivery colors. The car became our most effective advertisement. Videos of a Lamborghini delivering noodles, medicine, and wedding cakes flooded social media. Orders tripled. Minsu built a premium rapid delivery service for items too urgent for normal couriers. The attention that began with humiliation became cash flow Sungwoo had not predicted. I refused sponsorship deals that wanted me to mock Soyeon. The public story was simple. Rich girl insults delivery boy returns in supercar. Real life had debt clauses, dead mothers, frightened workers, and evidence difficult to explain in 30 seconds. Virality preferred revenge. We needed patience. Soyeon started working nights at our warehouse because accessing records from Hanul offices had become dangerous. She learned to scan manifests, pack insulated boxes, and argue with Minsu about route priorities. The first time she taped a package badly, Daeho tore it open and made her repeat the job. Nobody bowed to her. She loved that more than she expected. At Hanul, every mistake was either hidden or turned into gossip. At Night Owl, a bad label was simply a bad label. She improved quickly because consequences were immediate and ordinary. I learned she hated champagne, knew every worker benefit policy by memory, and had wanted to become a hotel architect before her mother died. She learned I slept 4 hours, saved restaurant chopsticks for warehouse use, and kept every rejection email from investors in a folder named Future Apologies. Working beside her made forgiveness easier and trust harder. She was brave when tasks were practical, but whenever evidence pointed toward her father's decisions, she changed the subject. I finally told her she could not expose a conspiracy while protecting every family member from consequence. She accused me of enjoying moral clarity because nobody expected me to preserve 10,000 jobs. I reminded her Night Owl now employed 37 people and carried my mother's home as collateral. Smaller responsibility was not imaginary responsibility. We argued until Minsu turned off the warehouse lights and told us to continue outside. The next breakthrough came from hotel kitchens. Hanul's chefs reported repeated shortages of imported ingredients despite inflated purchasing budgets. One chef had photographed delivery seals that arrived already broken. The seal numbers matched shipments supposedly delivered by Velox trucks that never opened. Someone had used legitimate hotel inventory to cover fake deliveries. Real food was diverted, resold through private restaurants, and billed twice. The restaurants belonged to a hospitality fund partially owned by Beck Meridian. The conspiracy fed itself literally. We needed testimony from a current Hanul manager. Most were terrified. Then a kitchen supervisor named Choi Myri agreed to speak because her son had lost a scholarship funded by Soyeon's mother's trust. The foundation had quietly stopped payments when Beck froze the account. Myri had saved invoices, broken seals, and internal complaints for 2 years. She had sent them to Chairman Han's office. Every complaint returned with a note saying procurement had verified the charges. The verification signature belonged to the chairman's chief of staff, not Sung-woo. Soyeon recognized the signature. Her father's closest advisor, Director Nam, had managed Hanul finances for 20 years and taught her to read balance sheets. If he was involved, the conspiracy had reached the chairman's private office. She refused to believe it until Director Nam requested a secret meeting. He arrived at an underground parking garage without security and admitted he had approved false invoices. His reason was not greed. Years earlier, Chairman Han had concealed severe safety violations at a resort construction site to avoid missing the opening deadline. A worker had been permanently injured. Baek Meridian obtained the inspection report and used it to blackmail Hanul. Director Nam created fake expenses to feed Baek-controlled suppliers while keeping the report buried. Sung-woo joined later and began taking extra money for himself. Soyeon's father had not created the debt conspiracy, but his first lie had made the family vulnerable. The foundation, the hotels, the employees, and Soyeon's future were all trapped inside the price of protecting his reputation. She sat on the garage floor after Nam left and said nothing for several minutes. I wanted to comfort her, but comfort could become another way to avoid truth. I sat beside her without touching. She eventually said the party insult had not been the first time she hurt someone to protect the family name. It was simply the first time the person returned in a Lamborghini. We now faced a choice. Expose everything immediately, and Hanul could lose licenses before debt restructuring. Hide the safety violation, and we would become another generation feeding the same trap. I argued for full disclosure with a worker protection plan ready before publication. Soyeon agreed, but her father did not. Chairman Han had recovered enough to return to his office. When we presented the evidence, he called the safety report a corrected incident from the past and said thousands should not suffer because one document lacked context. I asked whether the injured worker considered permanent nerve damage a missing context. Chairman Han ordered me out. Soyeon stayed. Through the closed door, I heard her tell him that her mother's foundation meant nothing if it survived by silencing workers like the people it claimed to help. She emerged an hour later with red eyes and access to the chairman's private archive. Her father had not agreed. She had used her authority as foundation trustee to demand records. It was the first time she chose responsibility over obedience without knowing whether the family would survive. The archive revealed Baek Meridian's real objective. The seaside resorts stood on land scheduled to become part of a national transportation corridor. If Hanul defaulted, Baek could acquire the land cheaply and resell it to a development consortium for 5 times the debt. The hotels were not the prize. The land beneath them was. Dojin's proposed marriage would make the transfer look like family consolidation instead of predatory seizure. Soyeon was not being asked to save Hanul. She was being used to decorate its funeral. Minsu traced the development consortium and found a familiar investor, the same fund that had pushed Velox Mobility into bankruptcy by canceling airport contracts. Our acquisition had not been random. We had purchased the remains of another company crushed by Baek's expansion strategy. That discovery turned Night Owl from investigator into direct target. Our airport permit was challenged by an anonymous complaint. 2 hotels canceled contracts. A bank froze our credit line pending review. The Lamborghini's viral fame could not cover payroll if our vans stopped moving. Minsu suggested selling the car. It was now worth far more after the title cleared and the media exposure. Daeho refused. He said the car generated orders and represented our refusal to remain where wealthy people placed us. I said symbolism did not pay drivers. We sold it anyway. Or rather, we signed an agreement to sell it to a collector with delivery scheduled in 7 days. The deposit covered payroll and legal costs. Daeho avoided speaking to me for 2 days. I promised the final drive would be worthy of the car. Soyeon learned about the sale and offered to repay Night Owl from her personal jewelry. I refused because her assets were already under creditor review. She accused me of deciding alone what help she was allowed to give. The argument exposed something uncomfortable. I had started protecting her through control, exactly as her family did. We rewrote our contract. Soyeon invested her labor, access, and legal authority, not hidden personal assets. Night Owl accepted the value of those contributions formally. She became a temporary project partner with voting rights over the investigation. Equality required more than refusing her money. Our plan had three parts. First, verify the old safety violation and compensate the injured worker before public release. Second, secure bridge financing that did not demand family control. Third, prove the fake logistics expenses inflated Hanul's debt and challenge Beck Meridian's conversion clause in court. The injured worker was named Lim Jai-tai. He lived outside Taejun and wanted nothing from Hanul. He had signed a settlement after being told the accident was his fault. His daughter showed us medical records proving site managers ignored safety warnings for weeks. Soyeon apologized on behalf of a company she did not control when the harm occurred. Jai-tai said apologies from heirs were usually advance payments for silence. She placed the original inspection report on the table and told him we intended to release it whether or not he forgave her. That honesty changed the meeting. Jai-tai agreed to testify if every injured subcontractor was included in compensation, not only him. He also demanded the new resorts establish independent safety councils with worker power to stop construction. Soyeon accepted before calling her lawyers. Bridge financing was harder. Every bank feared Beck Meridian. Investors wanted the seaside land as collateral. I approached restaurant owners and hotel vendors who would collapse if Hanul failed. Individually, they had little money. Together, their future contracts represented real value. Night Owl designed a supplier consortium. Vendors would extend payment terms in exchange for guaranteed contracts, transparent pricing, and a share of recovered fraud money. Employees would contribute through a protected pension fund only after an independent vote. The plan was messy and slower than one billionaire rescue. That made it more durable. Chairman Han called it humiliation. He would rather negotiate privately with another conglomerate than admit the company needed small suppliers. Soyeon told him those small suppliers had kept his hotels functioning while executives protected the brand. He said she was destroying the family. She answered that the family had confused secrecy with unity. Dojin responded by releasing edited footage from the party. The video made Soyeon look cruel, and me look like a calculating social climber who returned in a Lamborghini to seduce a desperate heiress. News channels replayed it beside rumors that Night Owl planned to seize Hanul's delivery contracts. Orders dropped overnight. Some writers blamed me for bringing corporate warfare into the warehouse. They were not wrong. I offered everyone the option to leave with guaranteed severance from the Lamborghini deposit. 3 accepted. The others voted to continue after demanding full access to the risks. That vote mattered more than loyalty speeches. They stayed after receiving enough information to leave. Daeho finally spoke to me again. He said a company became real when workers could disagree with the founder and still collect wages on Friday. Soyeon wanted to counter the video with her own statement. I advised against turning the story into romance. She said it was not romance. She planned to admit she had insulted me, explained the coercion without excusing herself, and apologized publicly to delivery workers rather than only to me. Her statement changed public opinion because it refused a perfect image. She said fear had made her cruel, and wealth had made that cruelty louder. She did not mention my Lamborghini, my company, or whether we were dating. She asked viewers to judge the debt evidence separately from her character. Delivery riders across Seoul began sharing their own humiliation stories. Restaurant workers posted unpaid invoice records from luxury events. The scandal expanded beyond us. Beck Meridian's strategy depended on making service workers invisible. Visibility became evidence. Minsu built a secure portal where drivers could upload route logs and payment records. Within 48 hours, we found 11 companies that had delivered to empty Beck-controlled warehouses. The false expense network extended through hotels, construction firms, and event venues. One upload came from a driver still employed by Beck. He had photographed Dojin meeting Sung-woo beside sealed trucks. The image did not prove fraud, but it contradicted Dojin's claim that he had never handled logistics operations. We arranged a protected interview. The driver never arrived. His phone went offline, and his apartment had been emptied. Police treated him as a missing adult. Minsu believed he had fled. Soyeon believed Beck's security team had found him. Either way, our portal had exposed someone before we could protect them. I shut the portal down. Writers accused me of silencing evidence. They were right to be angry. Building a tool without a complete witness protection plan had repeated the same mistake wealthy executives made, treating human risk as an operational detail. We partnered with a labor rights clinic, encrypted identities, and required consent before connecting uploads to cases. The delay cost momentum but reduced danger. The missing driver contacted the clinic days later from Busan. He had fled after receiving threats against his sister. He agreed to testify remotely. Beck Meridian filed suit against Night Owl for data theft and market manipulation. Our legal fees exploded. The collector buying the Lamborghini threatened to cancel because the car had become associated with scandal. Without the final payment, we could not reach the court hearing. Soyeon proposed one last delivery campaign. We would use the Lamborghini during its final week to deliver meals from struggling Hanul suppliers across Seoul, with every order funding the legal defense clinic. Not revenge, not romance. An absurd yellow billboard for workers everyone ignored. The campaign became bigger than expected. Chefs, riders, mechanics, and hotel staff took turns riding with us. Daeho supervised the car like a military commander. Soyeon delivered boxed lunches and sneakers and a Night Owl jacket. People who had only seen her in gowns watched her carry food up apartment stairs. At one stop, an elderly woman recognized Soyeon as Chairman Han's daughter and asked why a rich girl was doing delivery work. Soyeon said because food became heavy only after someone else carried it. The woman tipped her with 2 tangerines. Soyeon kept them on her desk for a week. Our legal fund reached its target. More importantly, supplier orders recovered. The Lamborghini no longer represented my answer to one insult. It became the most visible vehicle in a network of invisible labor. The symbolism Daeho defended finally earned its repair costs. The court hearing on Hanul's debt began with Beck Meridian claiming the conversion clause was valid regardless of procurement fraud. Their lawyers argued Hanul signed willingly, received funds, and failed to repay. Morally ugly did not automatically mean legally invalid. Our case depended on proving Beck financed fake expenses it helped create, making the loan fraudulent from the beginning. Director Nam agreed to testify, but vanished the morning of the hearing. His car was found near the river, empty. Police suspected suicide or flight. Soyeon believed her father had helped him escape to prevent testimony. Chairman Han denied it. Their relationship finally broke. She accused him of choosing one loyal advisor over thousands of employees. He accused her of handing family records to strangers who wanted control. I became one of those strangers in his eyes. He offered to repay Night Owl's invoices and buy our silence if we withdrew. The amount would clear every debt we had and let me purchase 3 Lamborghinis. I recorded the offer only after asking whether he understood it was bribery. He said it was survival. That word had justified every compromise in the story. I refused and gave the recording to Soyeon. She listened without expression, then used her foundation authority to suspend her father from financial decisions pending review. The board challenged her power. Employees threatened a walkout if she was removed. Suppliers froze non-essential deliveries. For the first time, the people who kept Hanul alive used their leverage openly instead of waiting for heirs to decide their fate. Director Nam resurfaced through the labor clinic. He had fled because Beck's security threatened his grandchildren. He agreed to testify by secure video from an undisclosed location. His evidence linked Beck advisory fees directly to fake supplier payments and proved Dojin's father approved the structure. Beck's lawyers attacked Nam as a confessed fraudster. They were correct. He had participated for years. He did not ask immunity. He said he wanted the court to know the truth, even if it sent him to prison. Accountability gave his testimony weight that excuses would not. The judge froze the conversion clause pending a criminal investigation. Hanul gained 90 days, not freedom. The debt still existed. The company still lacked enough cash. But Beck could not seize control immediately. For the first time, the trap had stopped tightening. The victory lasted 3 hours. Then Chairman Han suffered another cardiac episode after reading the court order. Soyeon rushed to the hospital and found him asking lawyers how to protect the family name before asking about his own condition. She sat beside him and told him the name had survived enough people. He finally admitted the truth about Jaitai's accident. He had ordered the report buried because lenders threatened to cancel construction financing. He believed finishing the resort would create enough profit to compensate everyone later. Later became debt, blackmail, and the sale of his daughter's future. Soyeon did not forgive him at the hospital. She asked him to sign a full confession and resignation. He asked whether she still considered herself his daughter. She said being his daughter was why she refused to let him die, believing love meant protection from consequence. He signed. The confession triggered criminal review, license inspections, and public outrage. Hanul's bookings collapsed. The supplier consortium almost withdrew. Every honest step seemed to push the company closer to death. I wondered whether we had mistaken truth for strategy. Minsu reminded me that strategy built on another lie would only create a cleaner version of the same prison. Daeho said companies sometimes needed to become smaller before they could become worth saving. We abandoned the goal of preserving Hanul exactly as it was. 3 unprofitable prestige hotels would close. Executive bonuses were canceled. The seaside resorts would be separated into a new company with employee and supplier ownership. The family would lose control of most assets. Soyeon accepted the plan before the board did. Her cousin Sungwoo called her a traitor to the Han legacy. She answered that a legacy requiring forced marriage and stolen wages deserved betrayal. Sungwoo attempted to destroy remaining records before investigators arrived. Minsu predicted he would use a delivery route because executives trusted service entrances. We tracked an unauthorized refrigerated truck leaving Hanul headquarters after midnight. I followed in a night owl van while Daeho drove the Lamborghini beside me, refusing to let its final week end quietly. The truck headed toward an incineration facility outside Seoul. Sungwoo's men realized we were following and forced our van toward the barrier. Daeho used the Lamborghini to block them, sacrificing the passenger side against the truck. He shouted through the radio that paint was temporary and evidence was not. Police arrived after Minsu transmitted the route live to the labor clinic. The truck contained procurement servers, paper contracts, and original delivery seals. Sungwoo was arrested for evidence destruction and fraud. Daeho climbed from the damaged Lamborghini and asked whether insurance covered heroic stupidity. The collector canceled the sale after seeing the crash footage. We lost the final payment. Then public donations and supplier contracts replaced it within 2 days. A Korean performance car company offered to repair the Lamborghini free for publicity. Daeho rejected the offer until they agreed to pay their mechanics overtime. The restored car returned in night owl colors with 1 dent left visible near the rear wheel. Daeho said scars proved the vehicle had finally worked for a living. The collector came back and offered double the original price. This time, we refused to sell. Criminal charges hit Baek Meridian, Sungwoo, Director Nam, and Chairman Han. Dojin denied personal involvement until the missing driver produced recorded threats from Dojin's security chief. The chief testified that Dojin approved intimidation but did not plan the original fraud. Dojin met Soyeon privately and begged her to say the engagement had been mutual. His father promised leniency for Hanul if public scandal decreased. Soyeon recorded the meeting openly and told him she would not trade truth for softer chains. He asked whether she chose the delivery boy because of the Lamborghini. She said the car had impressed everyone except her. What changed her view was that I had seen her family's weakness and offered a contract instead of a cage. I only learned about that answer months later. Hanul's restructuring vote placed employees, suppliers, and creditors in one hall. Chairman Han's family shares would fall below 20%. The foundation would become independent. Soyeon could remain chief restructuring officer only if elected by the new board. Some workers opposed her because she had benefited from the old system. Others supported her because she exposed it. Soyeon addressed them without claiming innocence. She said she had been protected by wealth, frightened by debt, and cruel when pressured. She asked for authority that could be removed, not inherited trust. She won by 4 votes. The narrow result pleased her more than unanimous applause would have. It meant people had chosen after disagreement, not because the Han name controlled the room. Night Owl received recovered invoice payments plus a long-term logistics contract. The amount made us profitable for the first time. Minsa wanted a real office. Daeho wanted a climate-controlled garage for the Lamborghini. The riders voted for better health insurance before either request. We approved the insurance. Then we rented an office with a bathroom door that locked. Success arrived as plumbing before luxury. I kept doing deliveries twice a week because founders who only read dashboards eventually forgot how long stairs felt. Soyeon continued working occasional shifts with us even after becoming Hanul's restructuring chief. Some riders believed she did it for image. She accepted their suspicion. Trust, she said, was not a bill wealthy people could settle in one payment. Our relationship remained undefined. We shared midnight meals, legal victories, and long arguments. The public called us a couple because the story looked better that way. We refused interviews about romance while employees were still losing jobs in hotel closures. 3 prestige hotels shut down with severance and placement support. Families still suffered. No restructuring story ended without grief. Soyeon attended every closure meeting and listened to employees blame her. She did not hide behind security. One former manager threw a folder at her and called her father's confession too late. She picked it up, read the complaints inside, and added them to the compensation review. Leadership did not transform anger into gratitude. It only decided whether anger became evidence or punishment. Chairman Han pled guilty to obstruction and safety violations. His age and cooperation reduced the sentence, but he lost his title, board seat, and public honors. Hanul removed his portrait from headquarters. Soyeon kept one family photograph in her private office, separate from institutional history. Director Nam received prison time for fraud and witness tampering, but protected his family by cooperating. Jaitai and other injured workers received compensation from recovered Beck assets and Hanul's new safety fund. The payment did not restore damaged bodies. It acknowledged whose comfort had been purchased with them. Beck Meridian was broken apart by regulators. Dojin faced charges for coercion and intimidation. He avoided prison on the most serious count, but lost his executive position and inherited voting rights. His father called him weak for cooperating. Dojin answered that strength had ruined everyone he knew. I did not become his friend. Understanding his family did not erase the party, the threats, or the missing driver. He entered a court-monitored compliance program and spent 2 years working outside finance. Consequence opened a future without promising affection. The supplier consortium stabilized Hanul's remaining hotels. Menus changed to use local producers. Contracts became public to members. Small vendors gained voting rights over payment terms. Guests barely noticed the governance revolution beneath their breakfast buffet. Soyeon transformed her mother's foundation into an independent trust controlled by workers' families, medical professionals, and employee representatives. She removed herself from permanent leadership. The thing she had fought hardest to protect became safer after leaving family ownership. I asked whether surrendering control felt like losing her mother again. She said the opposite. Her mother had created the foundation to help people, not to become a family hostage. Letting others govern it returned the meaning her father's debt had distorted. Night Owl expanded through the old Velox airport permits. We hired former drivers first and paid the wages Velox had owed them. The driver who fled to Busan became our safety officer after witness protection ended. He required every high-risk upload to include a human protection plan. Minsu turned the evidence portal into a worker-owned logistics transparency platform. Companies could verify route records without exposing driver identities. We licensed it to unions and regulators rather than selling it to the highest bidder. He said nearly losing a witness had cured him of worshipping scale. Daeho became famous online as the gray-haired man who weaponized a Lamborghini against corporate fraud. He hated the nickname and secretly printed it on mugs. He still inspected every vehicle himself and threatened to resign whenever marketing touched the car without permission. The Lamborghini stayed in the fleet. It delivered emergency medicine, wedding cakes, court documents, and once a single forgotten violin to a student before an audition. We charged premium rates and used part of the profit to subsidize regular rider insurance. People kept asking whether I had bought it just to humiliate Soyeon. The honest answer was no. I bought a bankrupt company because the permits were valuable. I used the car for her delivery because it was the only insured vehicle available. The revenge became real only in everyone else's imagination. Soyeon said that answer was too boring and suggested I admit the universe had excellent timing. I told her the universe had not paid customs fees. She called me emotionally unmarketable. 1 year after the party, Hanul hosted a reopening event at its central hotel. No champagne tower, no engagement announcement, and no service entrance hidden from guests. Riders, chefs, cleaners, suppliers, and employees entered through the same lobby as investors. Soyeon invited me personally but assigned Night Owl the catering delivery contract through an open bid. We won by a narrow margin because Daeho reduced fuel costs and Minsu redesigned the route. I liked earning the invitation more than receiving it. I arrived in the Lamborghini carrying 32 bowls of truffle cream pasta from the same restaurant as the original party. The crowd recognized the symmetry immediately. Cameras turned toward Soyeon, waiting for a dramatic apology or romantic reveal. She took one container from my hands and carried it to the service table herself. Then she asked security whether they had cleared the loading zone for the rest of our riders. The moment was ordinary, practical, and better than revenge. A young waiter whispered that he expected her to kneel and beg forgiveness like in online stories. I told him apologies were useful, but kneeling mostly damaged expensive clothes. Soyeon overheard and said my delivery jacket had survived worse. After the event, we stood beside the Lamborghini in the empty loading bay. She asked whether I had forgiven her. I said yes, but forgiveness did not make the party harmless or the debt crisis worthwhile. She agreed. Good endings did not need to lie about bad beginnings. Then she asked whether I liked her. I said that question was unfair after a 16-hour shift. She said rich girls were allowed one unfair question per restructuring. I told her I had liked her before I trusted her, distrusted her before I understood her, and respected her after she stopped protecting the family name. She said that sounded like a yes written by a logistics company. I asked whether she wanted a simpler answer. She stepped closer and said she wanted an honest one. I told her yes. We did not kiss beside the Lamborghini because Daeho had installed a security camera and would save the footage forever. We walked to a convenience store instead and shared instant noodles at a plastic table. Our first date cost less than the original rejected tip. Soyeon paid because she had placed the order. I accepted because refusing every offer could become another way to control the relationship. Equality was not pretending our finances matched. It was ensuring neither person used money to decide what the other was allowed to choose. Dating created new complications. Hanul employees wondered whether Night Owl received favored contracts. Our board wondered whether I would protect Soyeon during disputes. We created disclosure rules, recused ourselves from related votes, and lost one contract to a cheaper competitor. The loss hurt and reassured everyone. Romance had not merged the companies. Soyeon celebrated our defeat with fried chicken because she said governance required snacks. Minsu accused her of enjoying our pain too much. My mother finally met Soyeon at the warehouse. She recognized her from the insult video before recognizing her from the reform coverage. Mother asked whether wealthy daughters always introduce themselves by humiliating future boyfriends. I considered hiding inside a van. Soyeon bowed and apologized without explanation. Mother accepted, then made her help fold delivery jackets. By the end of the afternoon, they had exchanged phone numbers and agreed I worked too much. Alliances formed against me with alarming speed. Soyeon's father wrote her letters from prison. Some apologized. Others blamed me, Beck, the economy, and modern children. She answered only when he accepted responsibility without conditions. Their relationship became smaller, slower, and more honest. When he was released, he did not return to Hanul headquarters. He worked with a construction safety nonprofit under supervision. Jai-Tai refused to meet him. Chairman Han accepted the refusal. Regret did not grant access to the people harmed. Soyeon visited her father occasionally, but never let family meetings become business meetings. The first time he offered strategic advice, she left. Boundaries taught him more than arguments had. Night Owl eventually purchased the collector's failed luxury fleet after his business collapsed. Daeho called it poetic justice. I called it a risky acquisition with useful maintenance contracts. Soyeon called it proof I was incapable of telling a satisfying story. We did not keep every supercar. Most were sold to finance electric vans and rider rest stations. The Lamborghini remained because it generated enough premium orders to justify its absurdity. Practicality had made room for one symbol. The company grew across Korea, but riders elected regional councils with power over safety and workload. I kept founder shares, but lost unilateral control. Minsu said anyone who survived one corporate conspiracy should know better than to build another around himself. Hanul returned to profit 3 years later. The Han family owned less than 15%. Employees and suppliers owned more. Soyeon was elected chief executive by a board that could remove her. She called the uncertainty freedom. Financial media still described her as the heiress who almost lost everything. She corrected them whenever possible. Thousands of workers had almost lost livelihoods. Her family had nearly lost control. Those were not the same tragedy. At Night Owl, the former Velox drivers received equity from recovered fraud payments. The men whose signatures once created fake debt now owned part of the company built from the ruins. Daeho cried during the vote and blamed engine fumes. The missing driver's sister became a lawyer and joined the labor clinic that protected him. She later sued Night Owl over a wage calculation error. We settled, corrected the system, and hired an outside auditor. Gratitude did not replace rights. That lawsuit embarrassed me more than any viral insult. It also proved the structure worked. People connected to our story did not owe us silence because we had once helped them. Soyeon and I argued about marriage for months before discussing a wedding. Her family history made inherited control frightening. My company history made personal guarantees frightening. We designed separate ownership, independent boards, and no automatic transfer of shares. I proposed during a delivery shift because every elegant plan felt dishonest. The order was for abalone porridge, the same meal I had delivered the day I discovered her family's debt. I parked the Lamborghini outside the small porridge shop and handed her a ring inside an insulated delivery bag. She laughed so hard the shop owner thought she was refusing. Then she asked whether the ring had temperature control certification. I said romance was not covered by our insurance. She accepted anyway. We held the wedding at a restored seaside hotel that employees partly owned. Jaitai's Safety Council approved the venue. Suppliers catered under transparent contracts. Riders arrived through the main entrance. Daeho parked the Lamborghini where everyone could see it and guarded it more closely than the rings. Dojin sent no gift, only a short letter wishing Soyeon a life without negotiated affection. She kept the letter but did not answer. Some closures needed distance rather than reconciliation. Chairman Han attended under strict boundaries and sat among ordinary guests. No special speech, no family throne. When Soyeon walked past him, they exchanged a quiet nod. It was enough for that day. Our vows contained no promises to rescue each other from every problem. We promised to reveal risks before making sacrifices, separate help from ownership, and never use public humiliation as private protection again. Minsu said the vows sounded like corporate compliance. He cried anyway. Years later, people still recognized the Lamborghini. Children asked whether it was the car that defeated a billionaire family. Daeho corrected them. Documents, workers, and timing defeated the conspiracy. The car only blocked one truck and looked excellent doing it. The vehicle eventually passed 500,000 kilometers because we refused to retire it. Its paint carried small scratches beneath the black and gold wrap. Every mark had a route attached to it. The car became less valuable to collectors and more valuable to us. Soyeon sometimes drove it for charity deliveries, though Daeho required a 3-hour safety lecture each time. The first time she scratched a wheel, she offered to pay. He made her polish every fleet vehicle instead. Wealth did not protect anyone from warehouse justice. Hanul's Worker Foundation funded medical care, education, and emergency housing without family control. Soyeon's mother's name remained, but no Han relative held a permanent seat. The legacy survived by becoming impossible to inherit privately. Beck Meridian's collapse led regulators to rewrite rules on conversion loans and personal guarantees. The law still had loopholes, but hidden marriage pressure became harder to disguise as ordinary finance. Soyeon testified publicly about coercion without presenting herself as the only victim. Service workers used the logistics portal to expose fraud in other industries. Hotels, hospitals, and construction firms could no longer assume drivers saw nothing. Every delivery route carried witnesses, timestamps, and people capable of comparing stories. I learned the same lesson personally. During the party, everyone thought I was invisible because I wore a delivery jacket. That invisibility let me notice Soyeon's shaking hand, Dojin's smile, and the service corridor where deals happened. Power often revealed itself most clearly around people it refused to see. Soyeon said I romanticized delivery work after becoming successful. She was partly right. Long hours, dangerous roads, and unpaid waiting time were not noble. We improved wages and conditions because respect without material change was another speech rich people enjoyed giving. I also stopped pretending the Lamborghini was purely practical. I loved the engine, the ridiculous doors, and the way children pointed when it passed. Enjoying luxury was not betrayal. The problem began only when luxury required someone else to become smaller. On the 10th anniversary of the party, Hanul hosted another supplier event. The original mansion had been sold during restructuring and converted into a public hospitality school. The ballroom where Soyeon insulted me became a training kitchen for scholarship students. We delivered pasta to the opening. I wore a clean night owl jacket. Soyeon wore an ordinary business suit. No one announced our history until a student recognized the old viral clip and asked whether she had really called me a beggar. Soyeon said yes. She explained fear, coercion, and debt, then added that none of them changed the fact that the insult was hers. The student asked how I forgave her. I said forgiveness came after apology, truth, work, and time, not after a supercar appeared. The student looked disappointed because real repair lacked a dramatic button. Daeho revved the Lamborghini outside and restored some entertainment value. Soyeon accused him of corrupting education. That evening, we ate in the training kitchen after everyone left. The room no longer carried the party's hierarchy. Students, writers, chefs, and executives had used the same doors all day. Architecture could not create equality alone, but it could stop hiding inequality in service corridors. Soyeon asked whether I would still have helped if she had never apologized. I said I would have exposed the fraud because drivers and workers deserved it. I would not have trusted her, loved her, or led her into Night Owl. Justice and intimacy were separate decisions. She said that answer made the help more meaningful. It had not purchased our relationship. The contract came first, accountability came next, and affection survived only because neither of us could claim ownership of the other's choice. People remember the yellow Lamborghini because machines make cleaner symbols than debt restructuring. They remember a delivery boy humiliating a rich girl because revenge is easier to understand than a supplier consortium. I do not correct every version anymore. I only correct the ending. I did not rescue a helpless heiress with secret wealth. Soyeon exposed her family, surrendered control, faced workers, and rebuilt Hanul under rules that could remove her. I helped because our routes held evidence, and our company owed truth to the drivers whose names had been stolen. And yes, I once arrived at her gate in a Lamborghini carrying porridge after she insulted me at a party. Everyone expected revenge. What I found was a woman trapped inside her family's debt, protecting a name that had already betrayed her. The car opened the gate, but honesty, consequence, and thousands of ordinary workers created the road that let both of us leave.